Well, I'll tell
Oh,
you,
live.
yes, we just got live. So I guess I will just start then, since we have three wonderful readers tonight. Everyone, my name is Troy Myers. I'm a graduate of the Stonecoast MFA in Creative Writing at the University of Southern Maine. And tonight is an exceptionally special night. There's another Sunday night reading series of the Stonehouse Readers, which features alumni from Stonehouse faculty. Next week we have Aaron Hamburger reading with Shannon Bowring and special guests. And tonight is especially meaningful for me and Amanda, who is producing this show, Amanda Plough, who is behind the scenes right now, because we have three writers from our class, the same class that Amanda and I graduated in, summer of 15. And we all showed up, summer of 13, most of us, I think, scared, uncertain. I didn't know anyone. We were from all over the country, different states, and we became a family. That's what I remember. So tonight we have Sarah Baldwin, Eder McKnight, Heather Hummel, all from different states, I believe, too, tonight, and sharing their work.
And time zones.
And time zones, which is amazing. We're all here at the same time. Amanda and I are in California. Sarah, where are you?
I'm in Rhode Island.
Okay. And Eder, you are in?
Tulsa, Oklahoma right now.
Okay. And Heather, you're in?
I'm in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Wow. See, isn't that cool? Amanda and I kicked this off in the January of this year in response to the isolation of the pandemic. We wanted to get friends together, and tonight we definitely have friends together. So I always say hi to my mom, who watches the next morning on the recording, and Amanda's mom, who I have not met, but who also watches. And since we have a full slate, anybody want to pitch in before we start with the first reader? How does it feel to be here together?
Amanda just pointed out it's maybe the first time no one is tuning in from Maine. So if you're from Maine, let us know somehow.
I think she meant no one is reading from Maine.
Okay.
Yeah. We hope the whole state of Maine is not staying away. That's not.
We're in Maine in our hearts.
All of Maine.
Yes.
Is there.
Yeah, all of Maine is there. Well, how does it feel to see each other after, what has it been, 6 years? 5, 6 years?
It feels like a reunion right now.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to see Heather on a road trip where we just stopped and showed up and said, hey, Sarah and I just send like yearly emails laughing at pictures that we've taken together. But this is a lovely reunion. I've just seen Troy, you on Facebook popping in and stuff, but this is great.
Yeah, my heart is full right now.
Oh, I'm so glad. Well, Heather, you're our first reader tonight, and let's bring you up and we'll start talking about what you've been doing. What have you been doing, Heather, since Stonecoast?
Well, I have published 2 books since Stonecoast. I have one collection of poetry that came out just a couple days before we all started staying home, and that is Lessons in Breathing Underwater.
Very nice.
And then I also have a textbook that I wrote on short form creative writing, and that one was published by Bloomsbury in 2018. But tonight I'm reading from the new collection that I have just recently.
Heather, you just got muted. I'm not sure how that happened. It's okay.
Can you hear me?
You're back. Yep, you're back.
So tonight I'm reading from the new collection that I am just finishing. Can you still hear me? It says I got
perfectly. Yeah, you sound fantastic.
Okay.
So the new collection is not yet picked up anywhere. You're going to shop it, or it's already? What's up with that?
I mean, these poems are hot off my desktop printer.
Awesome.
The collection is finished, but it's
awesome.
not set to come out yet.
Okay. And Lessons in Breathing Underwater, that's a full-length collection that came out in before COVID. So
It came out in 2020.
okay, great. We can get that Amazon anywhere we want.
Yes.
Very good. So these poems tonight are hot off the desktop. I love it. New stuff.
New poems.
Very cool. All right, Heather, this is your time. So let's hear what you have to read. We're all anxious to hear your stuff. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to share a couple of fables that I have been working on. And some of them have mythological creatures or cryptids in there. They're these sort of funny, goofy little poems. And I started to realize that they're all about encounters with the unknown. And the more that I was writing them, the more I realized that they are, for me, sort of a fun exploration of midlife crisis. So I'll start with the first one. The Fable of the Selkie and the Fisherman's Wife. Starlight glazed the seal's head as he rose out of the water and met the woman's gaze across the violet distance. A curlew's cry trembled the salt meadow behind her. Dawn drifted dangerously out of reach. She wasn't sure if the salt on her lips belonged to her or the inlet. Sand shirred the dunes, the air a bitter champagne. Grass rustled as the cabin door rocked open. Eyelit curtains stirred. When the man stepped onto the shoal, she knew the story. Everyone does. She hadn't meant to ask, had she? Her face was wet. That much was true. The tide rose against her ankles. Already, sailors were singing drunkenly about this in the pub. Whiskey spilling, chairs falling backwards, they slurred her name. Before long, the sea pinks would light the moss. She had a few minutes, no more. Her dress floated around her as she stepped deeper, became castaway. He was the sea cliff she scaled as a girl, the fetch full of storm surge, the bell buoy calling, here, here. This one's also another fable that is an ocean-related one. And this one is called The Fable of the Sailor and the Kraken. When the sea cracks open and reveals a terrible funnel of teeth and steam, the sailor lets out a girlish shriek. Tentacles slither this way and that. Teeth gnash air, then anchor chain. The sailor longs for the dusty shade of the orange grove where he used to swing until his grimy palms blistered against the rope. The longing is so sharp. It's as if he can hear the bees in the fragrant white blossoms, feel the dizzy rippling sensation of swinging back and forth through sunlight and shadow. When the monster belches like a walrus and braces the sailor's wrist, he whispers, "Come here, sweetheart," and pulls. And the next one I'll read is about a jackalope. So we move into the desert with this one. The Fable of the Cowboy and the Jackalope. The creature would stot and prounce through the pasture like a tiny gazelle. It drove the cowboy nuts. "Vermin," he'd mutter as he mended the fence line. At night, when he heard it scratching its antlers on the ponderosa, he'd step onto the grass in his underwear and fire off a round. Annoyance was his only hobby besides ice fishing. Everyone in town knew what he was up to when he stared at the traps in the hardware store. This wasn't a squirrel he was dealing with. The damn thing had 4 points. He'd complain about its antics while he drank coffee each morning with the other old coots. Berlinda would say, "How's that saucy bunny of yours, Hank?" as she topped off his cup. He'd growl and knuckle his pant leg. It ate all the strawberries. It chewed up the Sunday crossword he'd left half finished on the porch. It won a fight with his best mouser, and now the cat only has one eye. Everyone had advice, of course. String up wind chimes, plant onions. Then the long chase changed, as they do. The cowboy leapt at the sound of gnawing, ready for a tussle. He rounded the tool shed at full tilt and froze. A porcupine, standing on its haunches, was enjoying a pumpkin. It looked at him and shrugged. Okay, if we have time for one more, I'll finish with one last contemporary one. So I live in Little Rock, Arkansas, but I'm from California. And I grew up in San Diego, and one of the sort of things that I always wanted to do that I didn't get to do was tandem surfing, which was really popular when my dad was a kid. It's still popular in some places, but not very many people do it. And so this one is sort of a fantasy poem where I realized that I still kind of wished I could do tandem surfing. So this one's called Joe and Stacy Take Up Tandem Surfing. She thought that in a past life they were trapeze artists or ancient lovers from Uttar Pradesh. So she said, "Please." He set down his burrito and met her eye. They started on the grass in the backyard, and it wasn't pretty. Wheelbarrows as awkward as usual. A terrible crunch as his nose broke. In the evenings, he did explosive push-ups with her on his back, both of them still sweat slick from their neighborhood jog. With the stag lift, he started to believe her, despite the gritty ache of his face. It was like when he learned to walk the dog with his yo-yo, that taut flick of the wrist, the gift of the perfect spin. When he rolled her from where she sat, perched like a cockatiel on his shoulder, into a swan lift, it became impossible to do anything else. He balanced her above him with one hand gripping her thigh as she arched into a crescent moon. The wave pushed them southward down the coast as she flew overhead. He spun her up and braced one hand at her low back as she stretched, belly up, toes and fingertips extended into a bow with one knee bent like a notched arrow. They had become cosmic, he thought. This must be Tantra. After that, office birthday parties began to give him a stomach ache. He could feel inertia overtake him like a righteous head cold. He wanted to pack up his office sweater and favorite coffee mug, tell his coworkers to quit prairie dogging, and walk out. They could live out of a van. They could move to Mexico. They could rob a bank if necessary. Thanks, guys.
We have time, Heather. Are you done?
Those were the ones that I brought for you.
That's fantastic stuff. Thank you so much for sharing that. That first poem alone, dawn drifted dangerously out of reach, the air a bitter champagne. God, that's good.
Thank you.
And I love the idea. What gave you the idea of writing, fable poems?
Well, I teach mythology
Okay.
at the university, so I think about mythology a lot, but I also, in my mind, I think about how often these days it feels like we are in a kind of mythical world. And so I sort of liked exploring that by putting those two ideas together.
What is mythical about our world now?
It doesn't feel mythical out there in California.
No, it does. I'm just curious what you think.
Well, in my mind, as I was working on these, I realized that midlife, the story of midlife, is not told as often or as beautifully as it should be. And so I really wanted to study the mystery of navigating midlife through these poems, and they were funny. I found it to be pleasantly hilarious to think about my journey in this way.
That's a wonderful attitude, as opposed to midlife crisis.
Yeah,
Let's
well,
find some humor.
it is, but it can be fun too, right?
And you're teaching. Where are you again? You're
I am a professor at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock.
fantastic. So anyone watching in Little Rock, you know where to go to school, where to take classes. And you had a daughter at Stone Coast, correct?
Yes, she's 8 now.
Wow. How is she?
She's great.
I'm so glad.
She
I'm
likes
so
to write
glad.
poems with me too, so she and I write them together.
Oh gosh, that's wonderful. That is wonderful. Oh, Amanda wants to know about the puppy. You have a puppy with you now, yes?
Yeah, she's being quiet at the moment,
Okay.
thank goodness.
Which is wonderful.
And she hasn't run on screen, so we're lucky.
We wouldn't mind. Well, Heather, it's so charming to see you again after so many years, and
Thank you.
wonderful to hear your work. You were strong then. You're even stronger now as a poet. I'm so happy for your professional success. You have 2 books out, professorship, a wonderful child. Good for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you can stick around, we'll bring you back at the end and we can all sort of say goodbye at once and touch base. So thank you so much for reading. Everyone, if you're just joining, my name is Troy Myers. I'm a graduate of the Stone Coast MFA in Creative Writing at the University of Southern Maine. Every Sunday night, Amanda Plow and I, my classmate, host a reading series for alumni, faculty, and special guests of the Stone Coast program. Tonight is a very special night for me because we have 3 writers, all from the same class Amanda and I graduated in. We just heard from Heather Hummel reading some brand new beautiful poetry. Her book, Lessons in Breathing Underwater, is also out and available. And our second reader tonight is Eder J. Williams McKnight. Eder, are you out there?
I'm here.
It's
Hello.
so good to see you, Eder.
Hey.
How are you?
Great.
Good. There were 6 poets, I think, in our class. 3 of them are here tonight, if you include me. What have you been up to since Stone Coast?
Whew, everything. I left when I was in Stone Coast. I had a newish born child who was a toddler, I think, at the time. And
Wow.
then we moved from New York to Tulsa, and I took the job saying, I can only take this job if I can finish my last 2 semesters at Stone Coast, and they agreed. So and so I'm teaching in an independent school, Holland Hall. Shout out to Holland Hall. And I'm in the upper school English department.
Cool. How fun.
Been writing a bit, not as much as I want, but I've been able to collaborate with local poets and artists here.
Great.
So that's been good.
Great. Well, I'm so glad you're here. And have you had a book come out yet? I haven't, but.
Well, I I've had, an art book collaboration come out called After
Nice.
21. If you know anything about Tulsa, one of the things you might have heard quite recently is that we are commemorating the 100-year anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre. And so there's been a flurry of activity around remembrance, witness, reconciliation, all the things. And I was lucky enough to be able to work with an artist and also a choreographer over the past few years in developing and presenting poetry that speaks to Greenwood, North Tulsa, Black Wall Street, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm.
And what makes it an art book? There's also illustrations and poetry, and it's mixed media.
Yes, I want to shout out Crystal Z. Campbell. This is her brainchild, and I'll talk more about her in a minute, but you've got a glare, you can't see it. It's a sort of, she has an essay in here, but she also has her photography where she takes vintage photos and reimagines them. She also has other collaborators in this, Liz Blood, etc. So there are essays, poetry, reflections. Yeah, it's just a great little book that she put together as part of her project for the commemoration.
Well, congratulations for being included. It looks wonderful. We're ready, Eder. What do you have for us tonight? What'd you bring?
Well, I thought I'd read from my pieces that are in that book. How about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. It's your time.
I'll give a little bit of context because if you don't know this story, you might hear these references and say, who is she talking about? So before this collaboration for this book that I just showed you happened, back in 2017, I was approached to do an ekphrasis poem. And Troy, do you remember us talking about that at Stone Coast?
I do, in Elena Rivera's workshop, I think. Yes.
Yeah. So I ended up doing it myself, and Liz Blood, who is a local poet here and has been involved with art magazines here, said, would you be interested in writing a poem that's related to this, photography from Crystal Z. Campbell? And I was like, well, let me see it. And I looked and I was like, yes, most definitely. And so I was really struck by Crystal's vision and how she took pieces of the past as meditation on our present, and how she was very interested in details and geometrics and reimagining, but then taking something that we still recognize as a beautiful, dignified image of people from the 1920s, before the massacre. But equally, she did the same with the rubble that came due to the massacre. So anyway, she's brilliant. And so the first poem I wrote for this series that I'm going to share with you came in response to her work. There is a scholar named John Hope Franklin, and I don't know if you guys have heard of him, but he has a park here called the John Hope Franklin Reconciliation Park. And I love this park. It has a labyrinth walk. It's a meditation walk. It has a fountain. It's sonically peaceful, but also causes you to look at the events that preceded Oklahoma's founding, Tulsa's founding, what happened to Native Americans, African Americans, settlers in Tulsa. It's like a very beautifully, elegantly designed space. And so in that space, I imagined, what if John Hope Franklin, who died in like 2009, came back? And what would he say about the events that are going on right now? And how might he leap through eras of time, being an historian? And how could I just make him magical? And let's just play with that idea. And so that's kind of what happened. So the first poem is called John Hope Walks.
Good. Okay. It's all your time. Thank you, Eder.
Here we go. Thank you for listening to that little history lesson. There's more I could say, but John Hope Walks. This was written in 2017, and it appeared in Art Focus, Oklahoma. Hands behind back, not in prayer, not in cuffs. John Hope circles his park this fiery afternoon. John Hope holds a brick. This is the brick of that bank and that home and that church, incensed like coals in kiln. Knowledge banked in John Hope's mind confirms the theory of brick and wall. How brick holds elements of earth, heat, time. How mortar is sand. How walls are mutable. John Hope finds a street, looks both ways. At Admiral, the way goes north. At the river, east and west. North is dark country, like Harlem is dark country to those who see a black sky but miss its guiding star. John Hope ascends the great wall of Greenwood, stacked with fired bricks. He leaps through epochs. New Amsterdam has a wall, 12 feet high. The Dutch split their minds and say, I know you. No red, no black, no Brit, no you. Then build a wall. North are Lenape, wild hogs, Africans, graves of Africans, their bones arranged in fractals, their skin flaked unto a brushwood wall, which became a road where streetwalkers buy and sell in marbled buildings, trade blood for margins, trade past for futures. John Hope walks the old green streets. There, the grocer, the lawyer, the eagle, Zion, the banker's opulent home. There, a grave of gray bones, femurs, cracked clavicles beneath a buried ballpark. The sky smokes, the scent of scorched trees. Black buying and trading closes as at the bell. Charred brick and mortar wall the sky. John Hope sees the light. Red, blue, pulse and circle, hands cuffed, sirens seduce the pop of bullets. Man down, they sing the names first and last, the yearly names chanted in pitch that breaks his brick. John Hope adjusts his glasses. The rubble in his hand holds jewels like red and blue glass formed from the press of time. He pockets them as native seeds. John Hope begins to walk. People appear from points in time. They move through streets like flashing stars. John Hope records their names, spills scarlet and indigo seeds as he moves along. I will read to you another of the John Hope series. And this one is called John Hope Notes. So you might have heard some glimmerings of like topical issues that aren't just 1921, but were 2017 going on in the last poem. And this poem, I just sort of redid it all, rewrote it all, and came up with John Hope, who's just walking around taking notes. John Hope notes. 1. We came here from there. Some feet tucked in leather crafted shoes rode in a caravan. Some feet walked until their souls wore off. Everyone had a trail. 2. By serving those with hue, I broaden light in all. 3. 36 smoking blocks choke our throats. The freedom colony raised. Clouds catch the embers, rain them down. Eyes catch the ashes, rain them down. 4. Comb the earth, search every trail for blood. Sift the soil for bone, scrape Frisco rails for flakes of skin. In night's blanket, Gather greenwood elements, fallen seed, popcorn kernel, darning needle, strands of pressed hair. Like magic, each becomes a proper name. 5. Things from ground grow up, then down, but silence is like wind. Topsoil gusts tornadic heights, bearing bodies charred and dumped. Without this lifting, they would burrow deep into the fault of earth. The next supply of sweet oil, drilled and fracked for world. 6. In the sift of red dirt, I find electric rocks pulsing. I light each with lantern flame, hurl one to One Oak Field, one to Reconciliation Way, one to City Hall, one to Lefties, one to Mount Vernon, one to I march on. 7. It is noisy. Rocks keep crying out. I blaze trails. Okay, this last one comes from, it's not really, it's related to the John Hope poems, but it actually is a kind of takeoff, spinoff. And there's this famous image here that you'll see of how after the devastation of 1921, people had to live in tents. And this image is very interesting because there's like this oil rig, this oil rig there. You can see tents, you can see the rubble of bricks that have been a theme throughout the last two poems. And so I had that photo in mind as I imagined the bricks kind of being personified and coming alive. Magic City is a term that Tulsa was once known by. So this poem is called The Bricks of Magic City. And if you haven't figured it out, Greenwood is the area that the Tulsa race riot took place in. And I think that's all you need to hear. The Bricks of Magic City. Greenwood's crystal knocked scatters shards. In the rubble, bricks turn away from the scorching. They have set themselves against. Even saliva spewed from the mob steam upon landing. The bricks reimagined themselves, congregated, mortared. Fire is how they had been Fire is how they had been formed. They need not be burned again. It is summer. 35 blocks, still green, heated only by vernal love, cooked in jazz. Stained glass windows of Mount Zion depict verse in color. The Stratford preens. Mist rises from mud-stamped roads, grass patches. Perhaps it is Thursday, when maids become belles again, strolling in freshly ironed dresses. The bricks do not shift. No one knocks them down. What if these 35 blocks could vine their way to Phil Tower, Maple Ridge, the river, Lake Spavinaw? Could they, like roping kudzu, choke out the Klan, outdo the crash of 29, flourish without class, integrate yet still stand, defy highways that slice the vining? The dirt roads are in on it. They scheme to outwit pavement so water can seep. And the buildings consider their holdings, industries that trade with Ghana, India, Toronto even. They house schools of ascendance. Their people fly, lightheaded. The buildings know their bricks could scrape the sky. It is summer. In this lot, encamped around a makeshift tent, each brick a fallen soul, scorched by explosives dropped from a plane. they pulse. And with that, I will end it.
Wow. Eder, that is outstanding work and so timely. I mean, it's always timely, but at the
Right.
100th anniversary, I only learned about Tulsa recently. Could you give us like a 1 or 2 minute, because people don't realize there were buildings that were bombed from the sky. What happened there?
Oh man, well, the story is so complex, but I'll start it with this. There's an area in Tulsa called Greenwood. It was prosperous. It was African American. It was started by visionaries who said, you know, we need a place where we can prosper. This is before 1920s. And prosperity did happen. In fact, so much money was circulated within that area of Greenwood because they had their own banks. They had entertainment venues, jazz outlets. They had hair salons. They had bakeries. It was just a community that was thriving economically and had infrastructure as well. And so it attracted people from all over who wanted to say, hey, I need a chance to make my way. So it's like a dreamland, truly. And one of the landmarks was a theater called Dreamland, the Dreamland Theater. That was kind of a sort of known place in the area. You heard in the last poem that there was a place called Stratford, and it was a Stratford Hotel, and it was a very fine place to be able to stay at Stratford, you know. But there was an incident that occurred, and apparently, or we don't know what actually happened, but allegedly, there was an African-American male named Dick Rowland who made a pass at a white woman who was an elevator operator. And she screamed out, allegedly, and you know, said that she had been trespassed. I guess that's the word to say. And Dick Rowland had to be ferreted away and was locked up in jail. And once it got out that that had happened, which is like one of the sins you don't do, right? But Black man, even hardly putting his eyes in the eyes of a white woman was just enough to get you hung. And that was sort of the spark that lit the fire. But of course, there was, you know, many other things that made that possible. And partly many people feel that there is no way you could have had planes that dropped kerosene bombs so organized if it was just a simple little unplanned, angry idea, I guess to say. I'm not sounding very historical at this point, but
you're doing fine.
But yeah, so it just was, you know, it lit a kind of, there was a lot going on that made Greenwood a place of envy and equally a place of prosperity at the same time. You know, it was tough. What was interesting is that even though there was so much devastation and there was so much you know, burning and fire and gunshots and people killed and that kind of thing, Greenwood came back. So people got together, and John Hope Franklin's father, who was a lawyer, John Hope Franklin Sr., was instrumental in helping people get their claims. And he worked out of a tent, he and his crew, to help to, you know, fight on behalf of people who were being denied by the city of Tulsa at the time. So Greenwood actually did have a recovery all the way through the 40s. And then later, once you started getting into urban renewal, and there is a highway that goes through the area, and as happened in many places in urban spaces in the city and in the US, it began to suck the life out of an area that was so prosperous. And so now Greenwood is in its next phase of invention and reality and people believing in it and trying to build it from the ground up, I guess, again.
But
that's a long
buildings, no, it's okay. Buildings leveled, people killed. That was extraordinary poetry. Like, those poems need to be out in the world. You read very well. Your
Thank you,
readings
Troy.
need to be out in the world. That stuff, yeah, America needs to hear those poems. Your sound, by the way, is exquisite. I'm a sound fan, and I like to hear poems with sound, and you use sound as fine as anybody I think I've heard.
Thank you,
Leaps through
Troy.
epochs. What a line. Ah, great stuff, Eder.
Troy, I
Have
want to
to come
say
back.
hello to
Yes.
also our other Stone Coasters like Robin, who said, hey, and I want to shout out my colleague, Greg Carey, whom I work with. He's also a poet. I'm trying to make him really, really get out there as well. So I just wanted to shout out other people I saw in the chat there.
This is totally your time. I'm just getting all excited and babbling.
That's
But
awesome.
Thank you so much for sharing those poems. We'll have you back and hear more of your work. Thank you, Eder. Take care.
Thank you, Troy.
Wow. Well, if you're just joining, my name is Troy Myers. I'm a graduate of the Stone Coast MFA in Creative Writing. And most Sunday nights, my classmate and I, Amanda Plow, host a reading series for alumni, the Stone Coast MFA, sometimes faculty and special guests. We are especially excited tonight because all three of our readers graduated with Amanda and I in the summer of 2015. We've heard from poet Heather K. Hummel and poet Eder Williams McKnight reading some exceptional poems there about Tulsa. And we have another reader, a third reader tonight, and that is Sarah Baldwin. So Sarah, if you're out there, come on in. Hey, how are you, Sarah?
I'm in awe. I'm humbled and honored to be in this company. These poets just blow me away. You too, Troy. I still remember things that you read at Stone Coast, but Eder and Heather, I can pick them. I don't know what I think I'm doing with them, but
you recruited tonight our readers or no?
I did.
I reached out. I was trying to get them both, but you pulled it off.
Well,
so thank you, Sarah.
I thank them. It was such an honor and a pleasure to listen to them. I've read Heather's poems, but to hear both of them speak them is a distinct pleasure all its own.
It is indeed. So what have you been working on since Stone Coast? I know you have a podcast.
I do. I have a podcast at Brown University on politics and policy, which is not really my bailiwick, but it has become my bailiwick. And I was thinking about it. I think my third semester, whatever we call that research paper project, was called Creating a Space for Voice. And I realized that I hope no one from Brown is listening, but in my own way, I take the great privilege I have in my job and kind of try to do stealth maneuvers to make that space accessible to people and things that I care about. And so I also do a lot of work with the art committee that I started, and I just mounted a big show about the less known people of Silicon Valley. So that keeps me going.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
I did not know about the art show. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And you work at Brown still, or no?
I do. I work. I work part-time. It feels like full-time.
Sure.
Probably is full-time, but on paper I'm half-time. And and I just took a sabbatical from my freelance work, so life is good.
Which you are publishing and have published some freelance essays, articles. Anything you want to point us to, or we can read more of your stuff, or hear what you read what you read tonight, or?
No, I think I probably I write for a lot of university magazines, and if you want to know about science and medicine and people doing good work in the community as physicians, you can ask me, but it's less exciting than the poetry. But I would say I kind of did a stealth move in my podcast. I did a mini series on housing, the history of housing in America and eviction. And if that is something I care a lot about, and if you have, 4 times 20, 80 minutes to listen to 4 episodes, it might be interesting.
We have 80 minutes, and your writing is good, Sarah. I like your nonfiction. And it's called Trending Globally, correct? That's the
Called Trending
podcast.
Globally. The
Okay.
mini series is called Less to Lean On. It's in there
Okay.
somewhere.
Okay.
I don't know.
Heather said there's nothing more exciting than Sarah's podcast. That's high praise.
Oh my God. Oh my God, Heather. The check is in the mail, Heather.
What did you bring for us tonight, Sarah? What are you going to share?
Well, it's an essay that I've been working on for a while, very inspired by my Stone Coast Writers Boost group. Shout out to
Oh,
all
great.
y'all.
Great.
Started by Robin and Enza and others, and we sort of check in with each other each week and keep each other accountable. And so I made myself say, I've really wanted to write about this topic to understand what I think about it, which is why we write essays, I think. And so it's also topical, but not as there's less gravitas, maybe. But it's something I've been thinking about.
Well, good. Let's hear what you have. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Thanks, Troy. This essay is called 23 and Not Me. As one of the 135, wait, I can't read that number. Hold on, I'm not good with numbers. As one of the 135,000 children adopted in the United States in 1964, I was possibly, let's say probably, conceived in error and birthed in shame, and then taken away to become another couple's dream come true. But I don't know for sure. For decades, thousands of adopted individuals seeking to fill in the blanks of their beginnings have started by requesting their original birth record from the Vital Statistics Office where they were born. Today, if I wanted to know how I came into the world, any of the consumer DNA tests that emerged on the market over the past few years would offer a shortcut to hunting down not only my birth mother, but other relatives as well. Yet, I couldn't be less tempted to do that. Apparently, I'm in the minority. Back in early 2019, MIT Technology Review estimated that more than 26 million people had added their hereditary material to commercial health and ancestry databases, and the market is expected to be worth almost 1.1 trillion by 2026. For a while, those kits seemed to be what everyone was giving or receiving as a gift, or simply ordering for fun. If the internet headlines were to be believed, I took 9 different DNA tests, and here's what I found. Some folks were leaving no chromosome unturned. Indeed, so many people seemed to be swabbing and spitting that I began to wonder if I were missing something. Maybe there were rewards to becoming acquainted with one's genome that I had failed to imagine. I'd never given the ratio of the length of my index finger to that of my ring finger a second thought. But perhaps discovering it would unlock some life-altering insight. And if that happened, what might learning the genetic type of my earwax tell me about my place in the human family? To try to understand the appeal of genomic self-knowledge, I polled friends, colleagues, and acquaintances who had taken the DNA test about their motivations. They were all generous and open with their answers. A few offered straightforward, even practical reasons. A coworker who's adopted wanted insight into her potential medical risks. A Black friend wanted to counter the long-standing unknowability of her ancestry due to the lack of vital records for generations of African Americans. A former colleague wanted to test the truth of the rumor that her grandfather was part Native American. He wasn't. But mostly people said they were simply curious. A lot of that curiosity was, what's my background, General? While some was, why am I the only one in my family with brown eyes specific? The husband of a friend said, only half joking, I think, that traveling to the British Isles to research the forebears he learned about through his test results was a good excuse to drink great beer and whiskey. One woman offered deliciously, being a melted version of a lot of others made me want to know my ingredients. Apart from some misgivings about privacy, no one I asked reported being especially worried as they shipped off their saliva. And except for being startled when they found out just how Neanderthal they are, no one related any bad surprises, except for one friend. This woman is a force of nature, smart and sassy, with a long and successful career in communications at Ivy League medical schools. She also has 2 daughters, both adopted and in their 50s, like me. A couple of years ago, on a whim, she got DNA kits for her family and got more than she'd bargained for. Not only did her husband discover he had a niece he'd never heard of, someone his brother swore he knew nothing about, her daughters each found their respective and very different birth families and are now in contact with them. One daughter has even met some family members in person. Even as she admitted that her daughters meeting their biological relatives was an understandable next step, did that step make my normally fearless friend feel insecure? Yes, it did. While fully supporting her daughter's choices, she found herself fighting off the question, will they like their birth families more than our family? Today, DIY DNA companies possess billions of records and have generated millions of family trees. The marketing is undeniably alluring. A pretty array of rainbow-colored chromosomal pairs parades across the 23andMe saliva collection kit, whose seductive tagline murmurs, "Welcome to you." Ancestry DNA beckons with the slightly more ominous, "Every family has a story," and the kind of clever, "Know your story from the inside." Its website features tales of men and women who, seeming to have solved the mystery of themselves, went on to radically change their lives. After learning that her adventurous spirit was in her bloodline, we're told, Heidi left her job and found her rightful place, leading echo tours through the Florida swamps. That's great for her, but still I wondered why she thought her adventurous spirit had to come from someone else. Why wasn't it enough that it was hers? I understand groups for whom kinship derives from lineage, and I get that the burgeoning genetic databases enrich the work of genealogists. Genealogy surely has its pleasures. It's historical, microfiche detective work that can reward patience and perseverance with entertaining or astonishing discoveries. It imposes order on the chaos of the past, bringing murky individuals into focus. Individuals whose coming together eventually led to one's own here and now. And it can simply be beautiful. Those branching, cascading genealogical charts have a fractal elegance to them that is part military parade and part ballet, like the grand finale of an Ice Capade show. But even taking into consideration the inspiring anecdotes of self-discovery, or the fact that the databases are being used to solve long-standing murder mysteries, such as that of the Golden State Killer and several other cold cases, I still didn't care what my deoxyribonucleic acid had to say. I mean, I'm adopted, not orphaned. I have not only a family, but also a family tree and a place on a branch of that tree. For me, blood and belonging are as unrelated as apples and rocks. I've tried, I really have, to conceive of feeling connected to my parents, not because they brought me home, but because of something in the blood running through our veins. But that's like imagining sex as a man. I can sort of guess at what it's like, but I'll never really know in any embodied way. In her book, The Girls Who Went Away, the visual artist, filmmaker, and author Ann Fessler writes that for adoptees, the adoptive family is their family. And it's true, though they're both dead now. My parents were always my real parents, my grandparents uncomplicatedly my real grandparents, my cousins my real cousins. To flip this question, would I feel less connected to my children if I had not carried them in my body? The idea is absurd. I love who they became in the world outside of me. Of course, adoption stories are not always happy ones. To the poet and visual artist Mary Kim Arnold, a Korean-American adoptee, adoption has felt very different than it has to me. In her intelligent and lyrical book, Litany for the Long Moment, Arnold probes her sense of loss and longing, what academics might call ambiguous loss, for the missing details of her beginnings and the mother she never knew, and for the country, culture, and language that might have been hers but were not. In Litany, she is writing into the rupture, trying to fill the void of her first 2 years, the possible selves she might have become, drawing on words, photographs, letters, and government documents, on records from the Orphans' Home of Korea where she lived as a baby, and on works by other artists, writers, and scholars. In the end, though, these are not enough to provide what she so badly wants to know. Holding fragments is not the same as making a broken thing whole, she writes. I've read Litany several times. I came to understand and solemnly respect Arnold's longing, but it was a longing I still didn't feel. And to help you understand that, I have to tell you this. I have always cherished being a question mark, a cipher, a butterfly who can't be pinned. As Fessler, who was also adopted, writes, I loved having a mysterious past, being my own person. That is why my way and Arnold's way of processing adoption feel like that optical illusion of the duck and the rabbit. As we contemplate the blankness of our respective pasts, where she sees rupture and void, I find mystery and comfort. Where she wants more of a story than there is, I press my hands to my ears. It's worth pointing out, I think, that there can be bliss in ignorance. The ability to identify inheritable diseases aside, tying your identity to a double strand of chemical bases seems like risky business to me. What if your genetic signature tells you something you aren't prepared to know? Just look at what's happening to the offspring of donor sperm. As Pam Bellick wrote in her review of The Lost Family, How DNA Testing is Upending Who We Are, reality as revealed by DNA may not match reality as actually experienced in families. Lots of people are discovering that they are the issue of one of dozens of transactional, shall we say, gestures. According to a 2020 article in the New York Times Magazine, a young man named Eli Baden-Lazar, who had always known his father was an anonymous donor, learned that he had no fewer than 32 half-siblings strewn across the country from Florida to Hawaii. The donor, he wrote, represented this absence we all had in common. But after meeting and photographing all of them, he noted that he and his half-siblings shared little or no sense of connection, and they eventually fell out of touch with each other. In the end, Baden-Lazar felt like they had been mass-produced and found it was more interesting that his father remained the missing and invisible figure he has always been. These gift-wrapped bombshells, as one journalist has called the kits, are also wreaking havoc with people's sense of privacy. Donors who thought they were anonymous are now being tracked down, as well as people's sense of self, as in the case of fertility doctor Donald Klein. Unbeknownst to many of his patients, Klein used his own sperm to impregnate them, fathering nearly 50 children that way. One, Jacoba Ballard, became haunted by the possibility that some dark stain in the character of this man, a doctor who grotesquely abused his position, might exist in her. Other people conceived with donor sperm have come undone the moment they learned that they were always a family secret or that my father is not my father. A recent headline put it succinctly: first came the DNA kits, now come the support groups. For the writer Dani Shapiro, too, casually shipping off her spit led to a traumatic discovery. In Inheritance, one of her many memoirs, Shapiro describes her utter dislocation upon learning from her DNA analysis what both of her parents had always concealed from her. The fact that the father she loved so dearly was not, in fact, her father. Or rather, that this beloved man was her social father, while a different man, a complete stranger, was her biological father. On paper, Shapiro and I have several things in common, so I thought her book might help me at last grasp the importance of genetic connection. We're the same age. Her Myers-Briggs type is INFJ, mine is INFP. We're both writers. We practice yoga. And we both love going to Provincetown and stopping at Arnold's for fried seafood on the way home. As children, we both stared at our faces in the mirror for long, dramatic minutes. We both snooped around our parents' bedroom. We both grew up adoring our dads. She writes a lot about her blonde hair. My dad used to call mine corn silk. And we both sought out, more or less consciously, replacement families when we felt disenchanted with our own. For Shapiro, the staring and snooping and seeking, the yellow hair and blue eyes, and her keen and yet ill-defined longing were the signs hiding in plain sight that she was somehow not of her family. But don't a lot of children feel like aliens in their own family? Don't most kids at some point fantasize about being claimed by parents cooler, kinder, richer than their own? My mother often noted, wryly but lovingly, that I was overly dramatic. But I never ascribed my hypersensitivity or adolescent disenchantment with my parents to my status as an adoptee. In truth, the fact that my parents had chosen me only made me feel more intensely there. They were stoic Yankee wasps. I was a moody mystery girl. So what? The seismic news that Shapiro didn't share any genes with her father plunged her into an existential crisis. My entire history, she writes, crumbled beneath me. The august ancestors she had always revered, prominent Orthodox and American and Israeli Jews who could be traced back to a pogrom in Poland, suddenly felt no longer hers. Who was she without this history, she wondered, and more essentially, if my father wasn't my father, who was my father? If my father wasn't my father, who was I? Yet, having read pages and pages about her intense love and veneration for the man who raised her, I couldn't understand why a lack of shared genetic material would suddenly stop him from being her dad. I remained stubbornly puzzled as to why it mattered. It's like suddenly someone telling me I'm not adopted, I thought glibly. Big deal. And that's when it hit me. It would be a big deal, a very big deal. I am, in the end, not so very different from Shapiro or from Arnold or from Heidi or from anyone wishing to know what their DNA might tell them. We are all avid for story. It's just that they sought theirs through knowledge while I protect mine by assiduously not knowing. Because the other thing I haven't said is that I do have a story, or rather stories. The first one is that I came from nowhere. The second involves sitting in a living room full of babies and being handpicked by my parents. The third is much more deeply stored in the folds of my brain. So deeply, in fact, that I didn't know it was there until years ago when my therapist asked me if I ever thought about the people who came before my parents. I heard myself say, "You mean the king and queen?" Without realizing it until then, my mind held a memory like a movie scene. Maybe I should call it a memory scene. The point of view is that of someone lying in the bottom of a small, rough-hewn boat, like a pirogue, looking up at a king and queen. Clothed in shimmering blue robes, they stand together on a rock in a black sea while waves boil and froth at their feet. They bend down and gently push the boat away from them. As they recede, they wave to whoever has just been put out to sea. I am the baby in the bottom of that boat. This might seem fanciful, but I think it makes sense. By making such stories, what is my brain trying to do if not subvert my initial rejection? I see now that my myths that I was spontaneously generated or carefully selected or launched like a girl Moses of the North Sea are nothing more than layers of nacre that my mind has applied to create a pearl out of the sharp-edged fact of my abandonment. I am not brave. Unlike Arnold, I do not want to know why I was not kept. So while the truth about Shapiro's conception is her kryptonite, the well-preserved mystery of mine is my magic power. Robin, shout out to Robin, one of the friends I polled, told me that she had traveled to Ireland with high hopes of feeling connected to the people there and was disappointed when she didn't. Then she decided it was okay. Just like interpreting dreams, perhaps one's adopted or inherited ancestry can be tapped into equally as places to search for what resonates and what does not, she wrote me. A lot of it is a kind of magical thinking. Magical thinking, meaning making, storytelling, claiming these are my people helps folks make sense to themselves. For me, it's the other side of the same coin. As long as I don't know who I came from, it can't be anyone, and I can be anything.
Sarah, that was outstanding.
Oh my God, it was long. I'm so sorry. I just looked at the
No,
time.
no, don't worry. It's okay. It was outstanding. Is that published somewhere, or you just
No,
read it?
no, I just
Okay.
finished it because I knew this was happening.
Oh, I love when that happens. Uh, that's a fantastic personal essay, and I know you're publishing. You sort of undercut yourself there. What was the one I read about forest fires? What was that called?
Oh, that was The Burning Question. That was about larches in the Arctic burning.
Yeah, and that's available online.
Yeah, that's Colgate, I think, Research Magazine.
Okay, so because don't put yourself down and say like, but the poets, that was beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing it. And I really hope to see that picked up somewhere where we can all read it,
Thank you.
because it is an outstanding personal essay. It belongs in any magazine I can think of.
Thank you.
It's very moving. My brother was adopted in '67, so I thought of the story. But it was, I love the personal pieces in that. So thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity, Troy and Amanda.
Oh, please come back and read again.
With pleasure. Thank you.
Good. Let's bring everyone back. Heather, Eder, how do you all feel?
I am blown away, period. That's what I put in the chat.
We're happy to
Wow.
do this evening with you guys. Thank you.
It just makes me miss you guys more. And Amanda and Troy, as someone who really does try to create a space for a voice, that's what you guys are doing here. And it's just tremendous. And I am so just tickled and honored to be with these guys tonight. And then just to know that you do this and open up this space for people. It's really special.
Important work. It really matters.
Yeah.
We just don't have enough friends. We just love seeing, we get lonely. We love seeing people, but thank you for sharing that. Eder, Heather, how was it for you to be here tonight?
I appreciate it. It feels like a long time since I've gotten to share poetry. So I'm very happy to get to talk with you guys about all of our writing.
I'm glad.
And to hear how their work has continued, you know, how their voices have continued since I last got to be immersed in their work live is such a treat, you know. It's just like, oh my gosh, I forgot how brilliant they were. Like just
I know. I think that every week.
Yeah, and I thought this at Stone Coast, and I think it now. The world is a more beautiful place because of the work that you guys are doing, Heather and Eder. So thank you for sharing it tonight. Thanks for saying yes.
For you, anything.
It's true.
I'm glad to hear you all say that, because you know, once you read here once, it doesn't mean you're done. We will, after the first of the year or sometime next spring, it'd be wonderful to have the three of you back to read again. You made a great team.
As long as we get to read together.
Yes.
We can guarantee that. We'll guarantee that. I'll make a note.
For sure.
And yes, as Amanda says in the crawl, in the whatever that at the bottom, the words moving the crawl, we are always looking for alumni to read. Next week we do have Aaron Hamburger. We've done a couple other faculty. We had Rick Bass. It was a bunch of fun and read some fantastic stuff. And we also had Ted and Annie Deppie, who right now aren't doing Stone Coast in Ireland with COVID and all, but they came on and read. Ted was faculty at Stone Coast, and we'll have Aaron next week. So that'll be exciting. He's reading with Shannon Bowering, one of his students. But we are looking for readers for the rest of November and the first part of December. And even next year, if you want to book next March, we'll put you down. The three of you were outstanding. We will bring you all back. And it was, I remember all of you individual one-on-one, and it is great to sit here with you.
Same.
Thank you, Troy.
Same.
You're very welcome.
Thanks, Troy.
Well, we will sign off, and another great night. See you all next week. Take care. Have a great week.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.